I've left a lot of the David Moyes stuff alone recently. I think number one, it's not particularly helpful. Number two, I've said everything I had to say. There's nothing new to add on David Moyes in terms of what I think in the short term, medium term, and long term with him. And I think, thirdly, our form's been okay. Slightly better than the teams below us. Not quite as good as the teams above us, but it's been okay. We've not lost loads. Not won loads either, so sort of left him to it. There was really no benefit to me carrying on criticising, David Moyes, really. However, I've got to do so now, I feel, because he's done another podcast, hasn't he? And he keeps doing these. I'm surprised he's doing it, and I'm not surprised to hear what he said, because I've heard him say it before. But I just think, I think now's not the time for it anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if this was a podcast that was done previously, as a lot of them have been. I don't know if he stacked a load of them up during the World Cup and they're now just coming out now. But I think if I was him, I'd be saying to somebody, don't release this stuff now. It's not particularly useful. Bearing in mind the situation West Ham are in, and we are in a right old pickle. There's no doubt about it. Look, I'll be honest, I haven't listened to the podcast, so I don't have the full context of it. I've read the transcript, which doesn't give you the tone of voice and doesn't give you all that stuff. So whilst that would normally be a bit of a disadvantage, I have heard him say these words from his lips. So I can almost imagine him saying it. And I do know that he holds this as his belief. What am I talking about? Well, we'll get onto that in just a second, exactly what he said here. But I can't help but look at David Moyes. He seems to view everything from a detachment. He looks at West Ham's position almost like the position now, he's got nothing to do with it. Always looks at it like a third party, like an observation. Did it last week with Thomas Souček when he was sort of musing. He was saying, you know what? Thomas Souček's had his position changed and we need to try and get him back to goal scoring. Yeah, he sort of had his position changed. Maybe his role's changed because of what happened with Declan Rice. Try and get Declan Rice more involved in the game. You think, well, are you joking or what? It was you that did that. Don't look at it like it's been an epiphany. Don't view Thomas Souček's positional change, what we've seen, as something that's just sort of occurred to you. It was you that did it. You did it, Moisey. You did it. Can't call him that, of course. You did it to accommodate Declan Rice, so Declan Rice could become more of a box-to-box midfielder, in the hope that Declan Rice was, I guess, develop as a player, sign a new contract, whatever it was. Anyway, but he viewed it as something that was detached. I can't help but feel he's doing the same thing with us. Let me just read it out. So, this comes from Michael Calvin's Football People podcast. Haven't heard it. Anyway, so this is what David Moyes said. He said, I think to myself, West Ham have had 3 brilliant seasons. You've heard him say this stuff before. He said, we avoided relegation. We took them. Them is a funny one. I'd rather don't use those terms. Anyway, we avoided relegation. We took them into Europe the next year. Then we get to a semi-final of European competition. We finished 7th the second year. So the perspective has made me say, yeah, you know what? If we're going to come to West Ham and expect to do 6 or 7 years when you're competing at the top, I don't think so. I think you're probably kidding yourself. This is a transcript of someone speaking. But he goes on to say, I think you're probably kidding yourself and I think anyone with any real football intelligence will probably go along with that. What he's saying here is, just to make it a little bit clearer, because it's not written particularly well, he's basically saying if you were to expect 6 or 7 years competing at the top in European competition, you're kidding yourself. And basically anyone that thinks that hasn't got football intelligence. Okay, I mean here we go again, really, isn't it? I mean this is a swipe. It's a swipe. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to take it be totally offended by it. It might be a swipe at the media as much as it is a swipe at the fans. But what it does, it views it with detachment, and what he's doing is he is absolutely setting out the parameters of the story here. He's asking you to believe a certain set of circumstances, but wants you to exclude some of the facts that go in with. Basically, it's half the story. Did he take us from relegation? Yes, he did. Technically, we were flirting relegation. Did he keep us up that season? Absolutely. I wouldn't even take that away from him. Far from it. Did he get us into Europe? Yes, absolutely. Did we have Europe 2 years in a row? Absolutely, we did. Fantastic. And that is brilliant. Okay, so what he's then saying is you can't expect that every season. Okay, well, firstly, I don't think West Ham fans do expect that every season. We just don't. We're grateful for it, but we don't expect it every season. So he's almost saying, so a relegation struggle is to be expected. If you thought anything different, you lack football intelligence. You're stupid. And not generally, but in football terms, you're stupid. You're a football thicko, basically, if you think those things. Well, I think West Ham fans did think those things. But what it does, it takes out a very, very important part of this, which is, okay, mate, I take what you're saying. And that would be true. His story would be accurate if it had gone like this. He'd taken over a relegation struggling team, and then he'd got them into Europe, and then the next season he'd got them into Europe again, and then the next season they were relegated. They were close to being relegated again, or hovering around the relegation zone like we are. That would be really, really impressive if that was the case, but he hadn't been able to strengthen the team at all. You see these clubs perennially, they battle against it. I mean, Sean Dyche at Burnley was a perfect example. I mean, he was barely given any money, wasn't he? He was, often would have to sell his best players, yet he still sort of managed it. And David Moyes, by the way, he's spinning, and it is spin, this narrative, would have you believe that he was Sean Dyche. Never mind Sean Dyche, he's acting like the orphan Oliver here. Honestly, he is playing the pauper's card. He's not a pauper. Because here's the point. I will take the first 3 years of your example, Moyesy, and they are good. It's a really, really good example. However, where your argument falls down is this, which is basically this year, the year you're struggling, it's not something we should have expected. And I'll tell you why. Even before we'd signed Danny Ings, we had spent £180 million this season. You were able to, someone like Mikel Antonio, you were able to renegotiate his contract. He was on 70 grand a week. You were able to renegotiate his contract, give him £100,000 a week. There's not that many managers, and we have numerous players on over 100 grand a week. Numerous. There ain't that many clubs in the Premier League that can hold the wage bill that West Ham do. So I just think it absolutely destroys his argument, which is basically, what do you expect? You can't continue to have European football. You're going, in our position, you're going to have some time down the bottom. I just don't think you do. And I don't know what the total net spend is. Okay, now because I don't know, maybe Paqueta was 40 million up front and 10 million add-ons. Maybe Danny Ings was whatever 10 million and then the 5 million as add-ons or something like this. But it is between 170 and 200 million pounds. It's somewhere in between that. And when you spend that amount of money, you don't get to spin that story like that. You don't get to do that, which is basically, look, we overachieved. That's what he's saying. David Moyes is saying we overachieved. In those 2 seasons in Europe, we overachieved. Now we're back where we belong. It's nonsense. Disbelieve it. I don't believe it for a second. Not when you spend that money, not when you have that many people on such high wages. Not when last season you would be able to go out and buy a defender for 30 million. This season you went out able to buy a defender for 30 million. No. And actually, when he gets a little injury, you're able to go and get someone from Paris Saint-Germain on mega wages. Not when you're able to go and get a goalkeeper from Paris Saint-Germain on 100 grand a week plus and you don't even play him. That's not the case at all. You just don't get to do that. You don't get to buy Italy's striker for £35 million and then get to play the pauper's card. You just aren't allowed to do it. The board, for all I will criticise them for numerous things, and I've done it on multiple occasions, they've done really well to keep Declan Rice. Declan Rice, let's be fair, as a lot of other owners who would have sold Declan Rice 2 years ago, they haven't. They've kept him there until it was absolutely impossible to keep him any longer. He's got one of the best defensive midfielders in the world playing for him in central midfield, yet still, he'd have you believe that he's put this squad together by loan signings and people from League Two and stuff like that, and actually we're the plucky underdog, we're the orphan Oliver, we're the pauper, and somehow it's a miracle that we just avoid relegation every season. I absolutely think it's nonsense, actually, and I wish he hadn't have done it. I wish he hadn't have come out in this. I wish he hadn't have done the interview. And I actually wish he'd pipe down and stop doing this stuff, really. We're in a right old struggle, a real struggle. There's a load of people at the moment, because I tell you what, there's people doing it at the moment. We've got a WhatsApp Patreon group, right, for our Patrons Addict, a WhatsApp group. A lot of the people on there are doing the predictor from now until the remainder of the season. There's some people have got us finishing on 44 points. Some of us got finished on 37, and it has everything in between. Whatever it is, we are in a massive, massive pickle. Now, we're in a relegation fight, and do not forget it. And now is not the time to be reading these transcripts that have come out, regardless when the podcast was recorded. These transcripts have come out now saying, basically, what do you expect if you didn't think we were down here? You lack football intelligence. I don't want to hear it. He needs to knuckle down, and he needs to win against Tottenham, and he needs to stop doing these interviews.